tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
One thing we have not done on this show in a couple of weeks is checked in with the ongoing criminal trial of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, the organizers and most visible faces of the Freedom Convoy, which took place in Ottawa about a year and, more than a year and a half ago now, but a year and 8 months back. And there was a bit of a break, and the trial was supposed to be done on October 13th, but they've added more dates. I've been told they could even end up going into December at the pace things are going. The Crown is still making its case. New witnesses were added this week, notably residents of downtown Ottawa who testified to the horrors that they had to endure as residents of downtown Ottawa, which, I mean, I'd be horrified living in downtown Ottawa myself, but they are not generally, but they were for those 3 weeks in 2022. I want to welcome into the show to talk about this Matthew Horwood, who is a reporter with the Epoch Times. Matthew, it is good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Your audio is a little out of sync, so hopefully we'll be able to get that sorted out. It might be an issue with our system here, but let me ask you about the decision to call these residents, because I understood when the Public Order Emergency Commission happened, people who lived in Ottawa have a perspective to share about what they were living in. The people that were testifying this week, by my understanding, didn't really have anything to say about Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, who are the two individuals that are right now on trial.
No, none of these witnesses had any direct dealings with Tamara Lich or Chris Barber, and that was the question that the defense asked at the end of every testimony. And the reason that the Crown wanted to have these people testify is to demonstrate the scope and the impact of the Freedom Convoy and the impact it had on residents. But the defense has said, well, we're prepared to admit that this caused disruption to downtown residents and their enjoyment of property, so there's no need to call these residents. And they also said that they would essentially be victim impact statements, which are normally done at the end of a trial and are not applicable at this point in it. So there were I'd say about 2 days in full where the Crown and defense spent time arguing back and forth about this, which of course added further delays to it. And the judge made the point that at one point that if they had been allowed to testify and hear from it, then we would have already gotten through it. So it just added a lot more to the lengthy process, added a whole lot to the Crown's case, from my understanding.
Yeah, and obviously there is an important aspect of this, and you need to take the time if there is a discrepancy to go over it here. But we're talking about a trial that was supposed to be done almost a week ago now. Is there any end in sight? Because the defense hasn't even made its case yet.
Well, it's certainly getting lengthier, and I've heard talk about it going into 2024 because of how many delays there's been, both with audio troubles, with delays and deliberations over housekeeping rules and adding these 8 new witnesses. But I mean, certainly it's important to have people talk about the impact that the Freedom Convoy had on them. But as you mentioned, none of it had any relation to Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. It only had impact or relation to the actual protesters themselves. And it's nothing new that we're hearing. It's the honking, it's diesel fumes, it's people publicly urinating, it's people being harassed for wearing masks outside. But none of it is really, as I said, giving a lot more sway to the Crown's argument and proving the charges at hand and how they relate back to Tamara Lich and Chris Barber.
Has there been in any of the trial that you've seen any real bombshell, like any real smoking gun, so to speak, that shows Tamara and Chris did something other than what's already been reported? Because I haven't seen that from my end, although I haven't been in the room.
Yeah, well, I think the best evidence against the two have come at the beginning of the trial when videos were shown by the Crown taken from Chris Barber's TikTok and Tamara Lich's live streams. Now, there's one clip. To start off, there's many clips where Chris Barber repeatedly says, be peaceful, respect police, don't act up. We want to not lose the will of the public. He says that repeatedly. But there is one video after the injunction against honking had been in place where Barber told protesters that if the police came to take them away, to lay on the horn and don't let go until, and as a way of letting the other protesters know that police action was happening. So that was a clip that resulted in the additional charge of counseling others to disobey a court order came into play, which he pled not guilty to. And for Tamara Lich, there's a video taken shortly the day before she was arrested where she tells protesters to, once again, as we heard many times, hold the line and keep fighting the good fight. And the Crown is trying to make the argument that she's counseling people to disobey the court order, to disobey the police action, and to come to Ottawa and protest. And the defense has made the argument, the rebuttal, that hold the line doesn't necessarily mean come and protest. I mean, there's a clip of Brian Peckford, the former premier of Newfoundland, saying that as well. And he means it more of in a way of, keep up, like hold true to your values, keep standing up for what you believe in. So it doesn't necessarily act as a smoking gun, but I would say those two clips would be the best pieces of evidence that the Crown has shown thus far to prove the charges at hand.
Yeah, the hold the line thing is interesting because there were no doubt in Ottawa people that viewed hold the line as being a very literal call. I remember on that last weekend, I was in Ottawa when the police were moving in, and you had some people that were literally saying, we've got to hold this line. And they were referring to a very specific line on the snow. And they somehow thought that if they shoveled the snow into like piles, that would, hold the police horses and battering rams and all of that back. And it lasted, I think, like 5 seconds. But then there were other people where it was like you just mentioned, Matthew. It was like more of a rallying cry, a spiritual cry. I mean, even that video when Tamara was arrested and she says, hold the line. Like what actually happened was one of her supporters who was filming it said, hold the line. And she just like kind of flippantly shouted it back at him. It wasn't like this call to do anything. And I think that that's where, I mean, the case really seems to be about trying to understand someone's state of mind, which is always a tricky thing to do.
Exactly. I mean, hold the line can mean many different things to many different people. We did see clips during the trial of protesters yelling that line, repeatedly saying that as they were being moved out by police officers. So, I mean, there's a debate about what exactly it can mean. But yeah, I think we're just going to have to wait and see what the judge says. I mean, Justice Perkins McVoy has been very fair. I've seen criticized the Crown lawyers more often than the defense lawyers, and she's been very fair so far. So we'll have to see what her verdict is, but we're a long way from getting there.
Do we know yet? And obviously the defense doesn't have to pony up its case until it's time to do so, but has there been any indication from the defense at how they're going to handle things once the Crown's done and it shifts to them?
There hasn't been a lot of indication thus far. They've mostly been poking holes in the arguments of some of the people testifying in the Ottawa witnesses. One of them was Zexi Lee. As I'm sure you remember, she was the lead plaintiff of the injunction against honking, and she testified at the Public Order Emergency Commission. And lawyer Lawrence Greenspan kind of...
Now, this is just for people to know, this is Tamara Leach's lawyer, Lawrence.
Right. And he was saying that she was sort of contradicting earlier testimony she had at the Public Order Emergency Commission, and that what she was saying wasn't fully accurate. And he also mentioned a clip where she's seen swearing at these people and being very, a little bit angry at them, as is understandable. But so far, it's just been methodically picking apart those arguments, and we haven't seen a real indication of what exactly their response is going to be once they get to that point.
Matthew Horwood with the Epoch Times in Ottawa. Good to talk to you, Matthew. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.